How are you guys doing?
We're
Um,
good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like I was just here. Um, so Ryan, I was hoping you could kick us off. Talking about Creative Commons and just how enormous a project has become. So can you just give us a little insight into just like how it works and what is functionally the best about having kind of like collaborative creativity and working and how that network kind of comes together?
Sure. Creative Commons is a suite of licenses for copyright that allow you to share your work under a set of permissive terms. Things like for attribution only or attribution but share alike. And they are standard offers, so you apply that to your work if it's copyrighted, and anyone can use it without asking permission so long as they observe the terms. Those works have been shared in every media type you can name, every copyrighted work that you could think of, or every type of copyrighted work you could think of, 1.1 billion times. And that number has more than tripled, or nearly tripled, since 2010. And those licenses are embedded in pretty much every major content platform you can think of, from Wikipedia to Flickr to SoundCloud to open access to research or open textbooks all around the world and in every language.
Yeah, and so how does that work? I mean, how do you build something where people are buying into this, or you create something that so many people are willing to use and say, I want to put in something because I know I'm getting something out of it?
Yeah. I mean, the way we built it was with a global community. Creative Commons has global affiliates in over 85 countries around the world, and we built the license suite collaboratively and in the open by working with all of them. So not unlike the last panel, talking about how all of us together can build something greater than the whole. And the licenses will be 15 years old this year. In about a month's time, we'll celebrate that. And so, it's something that has grown and grown exponentially over time.
And so Lily for Impossible, which is an awesome project, it's kind of a similar idea. It's like, how do you build a framework for people to all work together? And how do you get them all invested in it with their own time and their own skills and all that? I mean, how have you done that?
Yeah, for anyone who's not familiar, it is similar in philosophy. The underlying philosophy being that, as Ryan just said, we can achieve a lot more in the sum of our parts, so by collaborating rather than competing. And we look specifically at kind of peer-to-peer level sharing. So we built a platform. It's now under the name Impossible People, which is a kind of subsection of Impossible, which connects people peer-to-peer to trade skills, services, sometimes objects. The premise is that everything is for free, and it's a pay-it-forward-like structure where you get a lot from the community by giving your bit.
Yeah, and this is so unique, and you guys are both talking about this. And you were talking about the gift economy, and you were talking about gratitude. I mean, how do you, how powerful can that be to get people to say, like, I want to do something knowing that it's going to help someone else, and it's very altruistic, isn't it? So.
I think, massively powerful. To give an example, the British government say that the amount of things that people do for free in the UK right now is bigger than GDP. So it's like a massive shadow economy. You look at something like Creative Commons, you look at Wikipedia, you look at the internet itself, which, let's remember, began as a gift, and the open source movement, and we've made, I'd say, paradigm shifts societally through that type of behavior.
I was at a meeting with a VC in the Valley and talked to him about this number that we thought we were going to hit, which we hit last year, over 1 billion licensed works. And he looked at me and he said, well, is 1 billion a lot? And I thought, only in Silicon Valley could someone look at you with a straight face and ask you if 1 billion of something is a lot. But at the same time, it's a fair point. There are trillions of copyrighted works. What's powerful about the commons, about that 1.1, 1.2 billion works, is that in every one of those instances, someone like you chose to share, who said, I want to put this in the world, I want other people to use this, I'm going to make an open invitation to, really to collaboration, but in an asynchronous way, where I put this out there and many of you may pick it up and build something new with it, and I may never know that you did that. You'll credit me, I hope, and follow the terms of the license, but my hope is that you'll build something better, and ideally something I never would have imagined. And we're seeing that both in regular creativity, but it's also starting to underpin really powerful movements for innovation and creativity, like open access to research, which is trying to cure cancer, or in open education, where all over the world we're trying to drive access and equity in education by not just reducing the cost of textbooks, but bringing regular people into the process of writing their own materials so that they can be reflected in their own textbooks. So they can start to hear their own stories played back to them rather than just Western, established, white, upper middle class stories.
You could actually argue that a lot of academics and a lot of just human progress has gone through that process as well. So you look at like the scientific community and scientists each contribute. No scientist is working in a silo where whatever they do is uniquely theirs. They're always contributing to what's done before them.
Yeah, it's, you were talking about asynchronous creativity, right? It's giving people the opportunity to add to something whenever they're able to or whenever they feel like it, rather than trying to put everyone in on the same spot, right? I mean, that's the power of what you've got.
And I think also a key distinction is in kind of normal transactional behavior, you know what you're giving and you know what you're getting. If I was to pay you tomorrow to help me with something, you'd get X amount of money, and I'd know I'd get your time or whatever it is. Whereas what we're describing, it's you're still giving and getting. It's just not necessarily in the same moment, and so you kind of almost have to take a leap of faith that you're going to get something in return. Yeah. But the amount you could get in return is so much bigger, because if you think of something like the Commons, if I contribute one thing for free, my return is that I have access to 1 billion things for free, and that's pretty cool.
When Adam Grant talks about this in his book Give and Take, about how you don't get direct reciprocity, but the act of giving begets giving. And I think to your point earlier, the natural state of us is one of sharing. Our propensity has always been to share. And the thing that excites me is this sort of idea of serendipitous creativity or discovery that Joseph Gordon-Levitt talked about it on the panel yesterday, about how excited he gets when he shares something and someone takes a thing that he wrote and riffs on it and builds something he never imagined. And I think that story is true in creativity, but it's also true at the other end of the spectrum in science, where a scientist shares their raw data and someone finds a discovery that they never would have found. Or when someone uses text and data mining, which is using supercomputers to read thousands and thousands of papers to do pattern recognition and find opportunities for exploration that we never would have found. And some of these things you just don't get without open. If you don't open this content, you don't get these innovations. And it's both the exciting thing about this, but also the challenge of our work, because it's hard to describe what you lose if you don't do a thing, as opposed to what you gain if we do a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this idea of someone taking a leap of faith when they're doing something is really profound too. So for your projects and your users, what have you seen where that's succeeded, or where has that happened where you didn't think that would happen otherwise if something was very transactional?
So with the Impossible People, I guess the main thing that's come from it is relationships, and that's what we were gearing towards. I mean, of course, it's nice to get help for free, and there's a kind of practical side, but really it's about building relationships. And I've met many people through the platform now. In London in particular, there's a kind of community of people that I know through the platform and who know each other. And it's a certain type of relationship that I guess maybe is analogous to living in a village and knowing the people around you. They're not necessarily best friends, but they kind of got your back and you kind of got their back, and there's something nice about that in a very otherwise anonymous, alienating place like London.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. And how do you build community like that when you're, a village is one thing, when you're talking about, the entirety of the globe and everyone is connected? How do you create a framework that, whether it's, billions of pieces of content or it's a peer-to-peer, skill sharing, how do you create that framework to say, like, everyone come in and just be part of this?
Still learning. I find offline's really important. Events are really important. There are people I've met only online because we've got people around the world that I still haven't met. But when recently, for example, a guy that I've been speaking to for years through the platform, who's done a lot with us from Chicago, came to London and I met him. And it does change it when you meet the person because you've made a tangible connection.
I mean, I think from our experience, it's not one community, it's many. And it's a set of shared values, but it's small communities all over that feel kind of loosely joined. It's educators in South Africa who are building an astronomy textbook that finally reflects the sky in the south rather than the north. or creators who are remixing music from the Free Music Archive and trying to make new music that they can build on top of, or when you and I talked, looking for music in the archive for a video you might be making. So it's many communities that you may pass in and out of inside the Commons. We're certainly not one, we're many communities. And I think that's probably true in open source and in other creative communities. Like there are multiple communities that connect.
And one thing I'd actually also say to that point is we're open sourcing the platform at the end of this year, and the reason we're doing that is, one, because it's aligned and it feels like the right thing to do, but also because we've built a tool that I'm happy with, is technically solid and good, and that we hope will add value to other communities. So it might not. It then means it's not necessarily us just trying to grow community, it's looking at existing communities and saying, how can you kind of deepen your relationships, share more, grow, develop through using tools like this.
Yeah, and it's really cool that you guys are doing that too. I think it's going to have a fairly large impact once people are able to roll it out.
Well, I just wished it existed 4 years ago when I started, so I'm putting it there for the next crazy person who wants to work on the gift economy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's incredible. And it actually leads to the question I wanted to ask you, Ryan, as well, was, I think it's pretty clear that for digital media, copyright does not fit. The current copyright laws do not necessarily address the nature of digital media, wherever you fall on that argument. But I'm also curious, how do you get people, do you worry about people taking too much and not putting enough back into the ecosystem? Or is it just once it's out there, it's just out there for everyone? Or how do you kind of like continue to support its own growth?
Yeah. I mean, certainly the frame of copyright that we all live in was written for an entirely different era and an entirely different industry. It was for people who made printed books. And every single person in this room is a copyright holder, and every one of you created copyrighted works today. You took a photo, you wrote something down, and you may not even know that copyright is automatic, and it's for, depending on what country you live in, your life plus 50 to 70 years is the term of that copyright. And if you want anyone to use that work, you'll have to share it in some other way, likely with a license like the ones we make, if you want people to touch it. And so to get people to make that leap is a big ask. I mentioned Adam's book earlier. They did lots of research about the way reciprocity works in the Commons, and a Harvard researcher, Martin Novak, talked about it. It has a tendency to self-regulate, which is if people feel like they're being treated fairly, they have a tendency to continue to share. And when they feel like they're being taken advantage of, initially they will still share, and then over time they'll swing back. And I still think we live in a culture of sharing. We actually live in various cultures of sharings, where we share in walled gardens, and we also share openly. And for the average user, you don't feel the difference. But if you're trying to make something that you want to persist on the web, a video you want to upload onto YouTube and have millions of people watch, copyright matters a lot to you, because it can get taken down or you could get sued. And so creating those permissive spaces matter a lot, and encouraging people to do that. But I think it really, to answer your question specifically, comes down to gratitude, that people feeling appreciated and valued. The simplest form of gratitude is crediting a person properly for their work. Posting something on Tumblr, anybody who uses Tumblr knows how frequently it's just about a rage war for people who forgot to or willingly remove the credit from a work. At both ends of the spectrum, the joy that comes from seeing your work credited properly and being acknowledged and seen, and at the other end, that sort of seething rage that comes from someone stealing your thing and willfully erasing your credit, that's that feeling, that desire for gratitude, to be seen, to be known, to have a reputation.
Yeah, I think altruism and gratitude and being able to build on that is incredibly powerful, because it opens enormous amount of freedom for people and access and everything. And for the people in the room, a lot of startups here, developers, and everything like that, how what kind of advice can you give for how to harness that in a way that feels proper, in a way that doesn't feel like you can keep the leeches out, for the lack of a better word? How do you do you have any advice to share for getting that off the ground?
You want to speak from your experience?
I thought that was going to you.
Okay, I can take. I think it matters a lot that people understand what they're doing. And one of the things that we did, and my predecessors did before I joined Creative Commons, was really try and make it simple for people to understand what it was they owned and what it was they were giving away. I think one of the greatest gifts you can give is your work, and in Creative Commons you give it away forever. And so, to take your work and open source it is a big deal. To put it out into the world and say, this is for everybody, we want them to build on it. That's, you're giving a lot away. And so I want people to know exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I think that that's the most important thing any platform can do, is be really clear and straightforward with people about what you're asking, and then value them and let them feel the gratitude for what they've given.
And how about yourself?
In terms of what I didn't quite answer the question. Advice I would give.
Yeah, advice on how to, kind of harness a more gift-based economy, or how to harness that action
Within
with the users.
companies.
Yeah.
I think in terms of how to harness a gift-based economy, we all have that ability in any given moment, within your company, within your friends, within your family, within your community. It's just taking, constantly making the decision to be generous, constantly taking that action to be kind. And I think that can be in really, really, really small ways. And if you try it, I think predominantly people will discover it makes you feel really good, and that the world reacts to that. If you are generous to your colleagues, to your local community, you will notice that people will be generous back. That's really my belief philosophy. And then the world is a much richer place, because when people are being generous with you, you get fed by that energy. Practically in companies, I think that it goes back to gratitude. I think gratitude is massive. I think if you have to be really, really grateful for your employees, for your customers, for all the people you're dealing with, because without that, then the giving stops. The gratitude is definitely the kind of other loop to the circle.
Cool. Yeah, and I think it's interesting, and the reason I like it is just because, a transactional-based relationship is so difficult in digital spaces, because it just adds friction to say you have to pay for something or give something, and people, some people will just steal something anyway, or just take it or borrow it or whatever. So I'm curious, do you guys feel like this is going to continue to grow? How do we grow this type of philosophy? How do we support it? How does it, how can it continue to scale, I guess? What are your goals, or what are your hopes?
Yeah, so we're interested in the growth and the scale of the commons, but even more so, I'm interested in the usability and the vibrancy, empowering collaboration and gratitude inside that commons. That, an acknowledgement of what you said earlier, Lily, that this is all made of people, that these are things that people shared, and that they want to be seen and they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. I think that is the natural state of us, this idea of collective acts. I think we're in a space, especially this week, feeling that there are certain attitudes around the way we treat each other and individualism that are maybe at risk, and that many of us want to live in a place where we actually treat each other well, and where we are seen and acknowledged, and that there's a space for that kind of gratitude and generosity. And so I think it's a thing that will most definitely grow, and the question is, how will we grow it together?
Yeah, what are you hoping for?
From a practical kind of company perspective, so Impossible's now branched out, and we do lots of different things. The sharing platform is one product, and we're doing multiple different products now. For the sharing platform, we're open sourcing it, as I mentioned, end of this year. My hope with that is that it will grow and develop in ways that I can't personally control in a more open and decentralized way. And I hope that that like you described has a life. I would be so happy. I don't even need credit. I'd just be so happy to see it grow in other ways. And then I think there's a second point, which is less about the practicalities of where I'm at with the business, and more about a cultural shift. This week has been a very kind of, I think, quite shocking and sad week for a lot of people looking at the political landscape. And I would say now more than ever, we need alternatives. We need positive alternatives about how we think about our culture and how we treat one another, and the political implications of our financial system. We need these alternatives. And the gift economy is not the answer, but we need multiple other answers that are positive and constructive, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's not just one answer, right? But it's opening up new avenues of thought of how we can all collaborate, especially in digital spaces when we're not face to face. And it's easier to see someone and say, it's nice to meet you, and it's easier to connect with someone in real life. I think the biggest challenge, and this is what I'm the most fascinated for both of you to kind of carry us out, is how do you get that connection between people that feels more personal online, and then can we keep growing that? Can we keep fostering it, or are we just all going to collapse?
So I interviewed on this point recently a man who's become a friend who works a lot with Australian Aboriginal communities. And I think you can learn a lot from looking at Aboriginal communities around the world and how they operated. And he said that they have 3 laws: share, care, always tell the truth. And I think it's as I said, it is a bigger question here around our cultural mindset and how we treat each other, and we need to think really big about how we can individually change that.
We just conducted a bunch of research about our community as we're going through a renewal process with the global movement. And the thing that we heard over and over again is the power of meeting people and being connected. And so I really think your first point was one of the strongest, that it's not just about content. It's not about free content. It's actually about the people that make it and the connections that come between them. And so I think when we get that right, we get the other stuff right.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's a beautiful thought, and it's true. And I just want to thank both of you for showing us that it can also be successful. So that's the most important thing, is blazing a trail. So anyway, thank you so much for coming up here and chatting with me, and thank you all for having us. I hope you enjoyed it. So anyway, so thanks. It's two absolutely brilliant people.
Thank you.
Thank you.